Hi, I'm Pat and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to do a transmission fluid change in the BMW i8 for the transmission connected to the mid-engine. If you're new to the channel, please click the subscribe button and ring that bell for notifications as I'll be posting more BMW i8 content. Now, the transmission on the BMW i8 has lifetime transmission fluid in it. According to the factory, there's never a need to change it, and BMW won't change it. So why am I changing it today? Well, I took a look at all the mini forums, and I saw that people were saying that their cars ran better, and their transmission fluid was awfully dirty when they swapped it out of the minis that also had the same transmission mated to the 1.5 liter B38 engine, the same engine in the BMW i8. So this is my opportunity to go in there and do a first ever transmission fluid change. This transmission is made by Aisin, and I think I got that pronounced correctly, in Japan. It's also used on many other cars. And when I searched the forums to see exactly what other vehicles use this and to try to find some information and some instructions on how to replace the transmission fluid, I came across a lot of videos. So I do have a great guide to be able to walk me through the process of changing out the transmission fluid. So number one, let's talk about the transmission fluid that I selected and how it pertains to the i8. So before I ever thought about doing this job, I spent some time doing research. I looked on the real OEM website and I found the exact transmission that we have in the i8. And when I looked at the type of fluid that was in this transmission, it was also listed in the real OEM website as BMW ATF 6 along with a part number. When I looked that up on the internet, I was surprised at the cost of it. And I said there has to be another fluid that'll work and that is compatible. So I found this Febi Bilstein number 29934, and this was the exact replacement for the ATF 6. Now I looked at their website and it shows under the technical specifications that this meets the same requirements as ATF 6. And when you do pull up this particular part number, you'll see the BMW part number is also listed. So this is the correct transmission fluid. I also spent some time looking at some of the other websites that listed this transmission for their vehicles. And I found some YouTube videos of people doing the transmission fluid swap. This was great because it allowed me to see exactly what the components of this transmission were, how much fluid's going to come out, and how we should fill it. I learned that this transmission has 5.5 liters of ATF, and that when you drain it, only 3 liters will come out. And that's because the remaining amount of fluid stays in the torque converter. So we can drain 3 liters, we can fill 3 liters, and then we could drive the car around, but it's only a partial change. What's great about this is that we can do multiple partial changes. And because I bought the automatic transmission fluid at FCP Euro, once I drive it around and I have to swap it out yet again, I order replacement ATF from FCP Euro, and then I can send the old ATF back for a refund. So I only have to buy this fluid one time, and then after that, I can continue to do fluid exchanges whenever I want to. So I'm thinking about possibly doing this every 10,000 miles. Some people have even sent a sample to Blackstone, and I plan on doing this with this change in order to see exactly what is in the fluid, and then after I perform a few more changes, send those samples off to Blackstone as well. So there'll be a link in the description below with that information after I obtain it. Because BMW says that this fluid is good for life, they don't have an article on here on how to change the fluid. In fact, they won't change the fluid for you if you take it to the service center because they don't have an article in their manual in order to complete the steps. So what did I do? I went to the new TIS website and I found out how to top up the fluid in the transmission. Well, why is that there? Sometimes work has to be done to the transmission and some fluid will come out of it, so they have to top it back up. That information is extremely useful because after I drain the fluid, I can then easily fill it using those procedures. So there are 3 main components in draining this fluid. Number 1, there's a small drain at the bottom. Number 2, there's a pipe. It's an overflow pipe. The drain screws into the overflow pipe, and then you could actually remove the overflow pipe. That leaves a large diameter hole for us to remove the rest of the fluid. Then at the top of the transmission is another bolt, and that's where we could do our filling. Now, factory filled it from the bottom. Now, how did they do that? They left that overflow pipe in there. They filled up as much as they could. Then they started the engine and let the transmission run and get up to operating temperature. And then they were able to connect an adapter into it and provide more fluid, pump more fluid into the transmission. In fact, I've seen this on YouTube. There's another video out there that shows this exact process, but it requires some special tools. It's messy and it's hot. So when I found another YouTube video that shows you could just drain the fluid cold and then pour in cold fluid slowly through the top fill hole, I was all for that. So that's exactly the process that I'm going to go through today. So how do we access this transmission? Number one, we got to remove the air cleaner and the air box from the top of the engine, and that gives us access to the top. Number two, we have to remove the rear stiffening plate, and that's the plate that contains a little triangle that we can reach in through in order to do the oil change. That has to come down. Then after that, we have access to the top and the bottom, and we can complete the change. However, I'm also going to remove the left rear wheel and the wheel arch, and this will give me even more access to the components to be able to remove those parts. But first, before we get the car up on Quickjacks, let's go through the process of removing some of the bolts from the rear stiffening panel, because if we don't remove those and we push the Quickjacks into place, it'll cover the bolts. So let's get under the car first and do that right away. Now, in order to put my Quickjack under the i8 here on the jacking block, and I am facing the back of the car right now, so this is the right rear tire over here. These need to be removed because my Quickjack is going to cover all of these. And in order to get this stiffening plate off of here, well, I can't really put it on the Quickjack and then access these. So I'm going to remove these first. Now the bolts in the outer positions are T55, and the bolts in the inner positions, well, they're T50s. So make sure that you have one of each, a T50 and a T55, in order to remove all the bolts before we get the jack under the car. And these may be a little difficult to remove. I am using a small breaker bar. Hey, there we go. Not bad. So I can easily remove those. Now let's check the clamping force on these bigger ones. I think these are probably locked down, yep, a little bit tighter. So I'm just going to use a breaker bar and a cheater pipe in order to break these loose. There we go. So I'm going to finish doing that on the rest of these so that I can easily put my Quickjack here. Now you don't want to drive this without these in place. So once the car is in the position where it needs to be, go ahead and remove all the necessary hardware, jack it up, and then we can remove the rest of the bolts in the center of the stiffening plate. Now that I've completed removing all the bolts on the passenger side, I'm over on the driver's side. There's also one more bolt, and that's this 8mm right here. So this one's pretty easy to remove, and I love these little palm ratchets. Link in the description below for the palm ratchet, as well as a list of all the parts we're using on today's video. Now that that's complete, we can go ahead and start by removing the air cleaner and the entire air box. Let's start on that. So I'm going to climb into the back of the i8. I have a flat blade screwdriver, and I have this blanket here in the back of the car. Link in the description if you want to get one of these. That way you don't screw up your car when you accidentally step on it when you're trying to put your leg over. So this is the air box that we need to remove. We have a mass airflow sensor here, and we have a band that's connected to the clean air pipe. And of course, all I need to use is my flat blade screwdriver, and I'm going to undo the band, and then I could pull this duct off of the back of the air cleaner. Now here, in order to disconnect the wiring for the mass airflow sensor, there's a little gray tab, and I'll just pull up on this with the screwdriver, and then we just pinch it and pull straight up. And we can put that out of the way. In order to release the top of the airbox, there's two little clips on each side, and then we could pull up and then pull to the side, and that exposes our air cleaner. I'm going to go ahead and remove the air cleaner so I don't damage it. I'm going to set it in a safe space. Now, in order to remove the air box, there's a few lines here and some clips, and I could actually pull back on these clips to remove these lines and get them out of the way. And then this just has some rubber pieces on it, so we could just pull straight up on the air box and release it. There, that at least gets the air box a little bit further out. But we have a couple pieces of ductwork that we need to remove as well. Now I'm going to take the wheel off the car, and that way I can reach in and disconnect this part of the air box. And if you've seen my video where I remove the air flap to the air box, that's the exact same process we're going to go through, and that'll make it so much easier to get this out of the way so we can access the transmission, which is directly underneath. So we have the Quickjacks in place, it's ready to go. I have a link in the description if you're interested in purchasing a set of Quickjacks. Let's get this off the ground. Next, I'm going to go ahead and remove the wheel and the wheel arch to get more access to where that air filter is installed. And if you want to see that process, definitely link in the description for when I removed the flap in the air box. That's just inside there. Now that I've removed the wheel and the wheel arches, I can now see the air box. Now I've already released the air box from the top, so it's pretty loose. So our next step will be to remove the connector and some of this tubing so that we can actually lift it up and out of place. All right, in order to get this part of the air box off, I'm going to need to remove these ducts. There's one here. There's one over here that connects into the back. I'm going to have to undo this clip and the wiring that runs along the top, and then that way I have access to the box. So there is a little clip here that once I undo it, I will be able to pull the wire out. It's sort of like a wire clasp that holds it in place. And it is plastic, but it's a little bit of a pain. And then we're able to pull that out. So I got to do that. There's actually a few others on the back side. I probably should have got those from inside the car. But in the meantime, I'll just go ahead and undo this plastic clip. And then I can pull up on this connector and get that out of the way. That controls the flap that's in here. So that's now off. And then I can just remove the ductwork. There we go. And then the same as down here. There's a little tab that you push in. Let's grab the screwdriver, make my life a little bit easier. There we go. So that's out of the way. And then I got to do the same with the second piece of ductwork that's here. And I got to find the tabs, and it feels like the tabs at the top and the bottom. There we go. Now I had to do that sort of blind, but at least that gets the air box out of the way. So I'll undo these other two clips, and that way this wire can be taken off. All right, so I was able to undo a couple of those wires. Of course, it's hard to put it on the camera, but there is our air box. Now let's take a look and see what the top of this transmission looks like. So we can see that there's a rod right here, and that's what controls the shift mechanism. So that's an electronic box that has a shift rod arm, and that controls this part. So what we need to do is access that bolt right there, and that's our fill area. So I think it's better that we do have access to this from the wheel well rather than trying to fill it from the top, because that's pretty far in there. And let's take a look from the wheel well. Now that the air box is out of the way, we can look down and we can see exactly where we need to fill the transmission. And if we look along this control arm, we can actually see the plug. Barely, but it's right there through the frame. So when we're filling it up, we can get a good look at it. So there's a T55 bit that's currently in the plug at the top of the transmission along with an extension. I'm going to reach in from the side in order to undo it. But as long as we have a view from the top, you can see it a whole lot better than if I'm trying to do it from the side of the car. So I put a breaker bar in here in order to make life easier. This thing is really tight, and I'm going to just stick a pipe on the end of it and keep downward pressure and see if I can get this loose. There it goes. And there we go. Let's go ahead and remove the breaker bar And I'll just use the palm ratchet and undo the fill plug. There it is. And there's a view of the hole from above. It's definitely big enough to be able to fill, and I'm looking forward to being able to add fluid once we go ahead and drain it. That's the next step. All right, so we're taking a look here at the wheel, and just inboard is an air duct. Now there's an 8mm screw. Now I've already removed the 8mm screw on this side because that's what helps hold on the wheel arch, but there are two 10mm nuts here. I'm going to take those off on the both sides because you can't take the stiffening plate off with the plastic air duct in place. And just a word of caution, if you do this, when you take off these air ducts, you're going to get a whole lot of dirt and crap coming down because it seems to collect up in there. There we go. That frees up that edge so that this stiffening plate can come down. Well, this has been an adventure. Got all the bolts out, and I could not get the panel out from behind the Quickjack. So this part of the Quickjack has a rubber piece that goes up and touches the jacking point, which is under there, but this part of the panel juts out beyond the jacking point. So when I try to pull it back, it impacts the rubber. So my thought is put in 4 bolts and then lower the Quickjacks and then lower this panel and get it out of the way and then bring the car back up. Now sometimes that has to happen on certain supercars. For example, on the 458, in order to get the under panel off, you got to do the same thing. So the under panel does get in the way of the Quickjacks. This is the extended block that I put on top of the Quickjack in order to jack up my truck. And they sell these with even more extensions, so you can add it to make it even higher. This gives you more lift, so I use this with my truck. This is the lifting block that I had on the car, and I had it centered for the lift point, and that's why this rubber was getting in the way. So my thought is, if I use this now, and it fits, I have it under there. If I use this now, I can jack on the lifting point, and then when I lower the stiffening plate, I can lower it down low enough and then pass this area. So even if this is barely touching the stiffening plate, I can scoot it and then pull it out this way. So that's going to be my next process here, is to get the car back up on the quick jacks right away and use these guys to see if I have enough room to clear the quick jacks. All right, let's take a look. Yesterday I had everything unbolted except for the 4 bolts, and it looks like I might actually be able to pull this off. So now this is our new jacking point, right? And it looks like I should be able to scoot this a little bit forward, drop it down, and then pull it back. If I can't do that, I can always scoot it down, push it forward, and let it lay on top of the quick jacks. And because I only need to expose, this area right around the engine, so I don't need the entire stiffening plate removed. So looking at the other side, here we are. Yeah, the stiffening plate has plenty of room between it and the lifting, that lifting part there. So I think that is going to be my plan, is to come down with the stiffening plate and then take it forward and let it rest on the quick jacks. And I could always, bring a jack stand in here to rest the center part of it, further up the car, maybe in this area. Let's see if that works. Okay, stiffening plate on my knees and my hands. Just drop it down a little bit and then walk it back. That's working better than I thought it would. Let me see if I can grab those little metal shims. I know there's a couple in here somewhere. There we are. Just to make sure we put them in a safe place, because we're going to have to put them back on. So I'm going to walk this as far forward as I can. So I'm up to the front jacking points at this point, and just going to move the jack stand under the back of it. Oh, that's perfect. That is really perfect. I have access to literally everything back here. That keeps it just far forward that it's not going to impede anything. Wow. Okay, this is really great. Now, before I start this job, I went ahead and rinsed out really well my oil catch pan. And that's because I want to collect this transmission fluid and then measure it. And I don't want any contamination, because I want to put in exactly what came out. So this is clean and ready to go. Our drain plug is a Torx T40 bit, so we're going to remove that first. Switching over to my palm ratchet makes life a little bit easier. Yep, feels like it's about ready to come out. I'm just going to hold my catch can closer. There we go. And it's a brown color. Now, because the transmission fluid isn't hot, it will definitely go above the overflow tube, which is this piece. So we're going to let this drain as far as it'll go, and then we're going to remove this, the overflow, or the overflow pipe, or the bigger drain plug, whatever you want to call it. And while that's draining, I'm also going to go ahead and take a sample for Blackstone. Now that that is completely drained, we're going to go ahead and use a 17 millimeter hex. So I found this online, and it fits right in that hole. It's going to get a little messy here because we're going to have a little bit of a drain coming out at the same time I'm loosening this up, but it's on there pretty tight. There it goes. I should just be able to loosen this. I'll probably get some transmission fluid flowing around the outside of it. As I lower it, it's also going to have some transmission fluid coming down the overflow pipe here as well. So let's see. I'm just going to hold this up a little bit higher. Hopefully you'll be able to see this on camera. Feels like, yeah, I'm close. I'm really close to it coming out now. Let it drain a little more. Okay, so I'm just going to unscrew this and allow the fluid to go directly into this container. There it goes. It worked. There's our overflow pipe. I'm just going to place that directly in the other pan right now. All right. I could pull this out of the way and let it dribble into the other pan. While I have everything out of the car, we'll take a closer look. So this is the fill plug. So this is what we removed first. And of course it has a seal on it, and these can be replaced. So I think the next time I do another transmission fluid change, I'm going to have some seals on hand. And then this is the drain plug that, of course, it also has a little O-ring seal on it. And this is the overflow pipe, and it also has a little seal on it. So I'm going to pick a set of seals up next time I do this. This overflow pipe, the way it works, the way it's designed to work, you put this in the transmission first, and then you fill the transmission full of fluid, and usually put about 5 liters in, and then it'll start to crest the top of this overflow pipe and then drain out this drain plug. And that's when you would turn the vehicle on and run it up to operating temperature, and then insert more fluid through this hole so that it would come up over the overflow pipe, and as fluid comes up to the top, it'll overflow, and then you cap it with the drain plug. So that's how you would fill this worm. Now I'm going to measure the fluid that I have in the i8 that I've just drained, and I'm going to replace it with the same amount. So I have to reinstall this pipe, and then I can reinstall this drain plug. Once I get the same amount of fluid in that I took out, I will then cap it with the fill plug. So the first thing we're going to do after we clean up the overflow pipe, we're just going to wipe any excess oil from the bottom of the transmission. It is still going to drain a little bit, but I want to make sure that the sealing area with the O-ring is clean. Doesn't have any debris or anything there, so the O-ring seals perfectly. Then I'm going to go ahead and install the overflow pipe. And we do have a torque setting of 45 Newton meters. So once this is in place, we can tighten it down to 45 Newton meters, and then we can install the drain plug. So we're going to use the T40 bit. I'm just going to get it started here, and this also gets torqued down. And this gets torqued to 8 Newton meters. Perfect. Okay, that seals up the bottom of the transmission. I'm just going to make sure there's no more oil anywhere. Did get a little bit of oil on the acoustic cover here, but at this point I can remove the drain pan and then measure the amount of fluid that we just took out of it. So we could tell from the graduated measuring on the side here, we're just above 2.5 liters. We're not quite 3 liters. We have 3 liters of ATF to put in the car, but we're not going to put that much in. We're going to put in a little bit more than 2.5. So at this point, the very minuscule amount that I retrieved to send off to Blackstone and the residual that's left in the pan there are about 2.75-ish. So that's what I'm going to put back in the car. Now I've read on the mini forums that when you try to add this fluid to the top of the transmission fill plug is so small and I don't think it's that small, but they said that it's nearly impossible to get fluid in there fast. And I believe that they're probably using a funnel that's the same diameter as this fill plug, and that's why they can't get the fluid in there. Well, I have this fluid extractor. It's called the MightVac, and really what it's designed to do is, pull fluid out of something. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to disassemble this, take the plunger out, and what I have now is a funnel and a tube. So I'm going to stick this into the top of the transmission, and I'm going to pour transmission oil into this and then feed it in. This is a very small tube, but I think that because it's not a funnel, there will be enough of a gap, enough of an air gap, between the sides here to allow air to escape as I'm adding fluid. I'm actually using a ladder to get in the i8 now that it's jacked up higher than it was before. So let's hop in the trunk and we'll take a look. We could see the fill hole down there. And I have some fluid ready to go here. And all I need to do is take this funnel, and stick it right here so that it can fill. And I know that if I turn this a certain way, because I did pre-fit it before, I'm actually able to get it down in the transmission a little bit further. And then that way I shouldn't have any problems with, with it overfilling. So at this point, the MightVac is ready to go. I'll go ahead and open one of the containers and start to pour fluid in. Now I want to turn it this way because it'll pour better. It's just a little tricky here to get everything lined up the way I want it to. I'll just put a little bit in there. You can see it's going in pretty slow, but it is going in, so I can put a little bit in at a time. And just let it fill up. Hang out here in the back of the i8 and let the fluid go into the transmission. Finally, we're going to install the fill plug cap, and I'm just going to have to eye it up here. There we go. And I'm going to use a T55 and also tighten this to 45 Newton meters. If I can get in here with my torque wrench and the smallest extension possible. That's 45. Good. That takes care of that. Let's get back under the car. We'll do the stiffening plate, cover everything up on the bottom, get everything tidied up there so that we can lower the car and then finish putting the airbox in up here. Getting the stiffening plate into position and tighten requires a lot of specific steps. I've taken the liberty of using the new TIS website and modifying one of the photos in order to show exactly what torques are required in order to tighten each individual part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the stiffening plate into place, and I'm just going to tighten 4 bolts just so it stays in place, and then walk through the tightening sequence, with number 1 being the 6 bolts at the far end, and those are need to be tightened pretty much 56 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. Now, these are the T55 Torx bits, and they should be renewed, but I'm going to be doing this process again, so I'll be sure to get new screws the next time I do this procedure. And they do have some blue Loctite on them, so that's the other thing that keeps them from backing out. But now at the very top of the panel, there are these little silver shims, and these need to be installed between the stiffening plate and the body. So I'm just going to start a few of these into place. So the final thing I'm going to do is button everything up back here, put the air cleaner in, take it for a test drive, and see how she rides. Obviously, this is a learning experience for me, and I'm thankful that you came along for the ride. If you like this video, please give me a big thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel and ringing that bell for notifications, as I'll be posting more BMW i8 content. Thanks for watching, and happy motoring.